I want to start off by really talking about and impressing upon everyone what really happens on the web in a minute and help everyone understand. I think this really follows nicely from what Kahlo said this morning, and I really appreciate that Glenn actually gave me a nice intro talking about big data. I didn't talk to him about that in advance, so I do appreciate that. But I found this cool infographic about 1 minute on the internet and what occurs. And it's just really impressive to me. 204 million emails are sent in a minute, which is amazing. I mean, that's a lot of emails. 1,300 people who weren't using mobile devices before start using mobile devices. There are 100 people who join LinkedIn and over 2 million searches on Google. So why I think this is really important and why I'm starting with this is because what it really tells us is that the volume of data on the web is massive and it's only growing. And this is really important for us to remember, I think, because as we move forward, and Glenn actually touched on this, that amount of data is going to continue to grow. And nobody's really pulling it down. Nobody's working on the effort of taking down the data that's not relevant. So all of the data out there is going to remain, but only some of it is still valuable as time goes on. Some of it remains valuable for an extended period of time. Some of it's valuable for a short instant, but all of it remains. And so as time goes on and as we move forward and we continue minute by minute to create all of this massive volume of content, it's going to become more and more challenging to find what's actually of interest to you. So for the purposes of today's conversation, I want to focus on 3 approaches to content. Specifically, create. What I mean by that is really creation of original content. And to bring it back, I think you can think of things like publications, for example, original content that's being generated. Comment, I think of that as providing perspective on content that's out there already. So things like white papers or blogs, that type of information. And then curate, which I hope you understand. That's what I'm going to focus my conversation on. Curate is really about someone who serves as a specialist or an expert in a content area on a specific topic, for example, and pulls together a collection of information around that topic. Now, when curation is really successful, that person is also providing opinions and insights on that topic. So I don't want to confuse you and think that I'm suggesting that these are the only approaches to content, but they are the ones that I want to focus on today. And I don't actually feel like they're mutually exclusive. What I think is most interesting is that, as we talk through this, I think it's really helpful to consider where your marketing mix falls within this spectrum. So before I move forward, I want to pause and take a quick poll of the audience, completely off topic. I'm interested by show of hands to know how many people in the audience actually take responsibility for making dinner in their household. This could be on occasion, on a regular basis, just by a show of hands. Okay, so a lot of you. Thanks. We're going to come back to that. So let's see. In the legal market, I really do feel like content right now, the approaches that we're taking to content falls very much in between the create and the comment area. So I want to focus on curation and the power that it really can provide to us. So curation as a topic, as an approach to content really isn't new, right? We have this notion of museums and newspapers. Both of these have always been in the business of curation. As a museum curator, your job is to really be an expert or a specialist in a certain area of art and to find and source the collection that appears on the museum walls. As a newspaper editor, your job is to gather all of the different articles from the different authors and assemble them in a way that becomes the newspaper. And what's different about this concept of curation is that the individual who's actually doing the curating in these instances is really behind the scenes, and the actual collection itself is the star, right? So we're going to talk about shifting that. In order to be a good curator, you need to be an expert or a specialist or have some level of knowledge on a certain topic. And I think it's really powerful, like I said before, to be able to provide some opinion on that topic. But what we're seeing is that curators are actually elevating themselves from behind the scenes to front and center and building up some reputation through the act of curation. So what I'm going to do is actually talk through a couple of examples. Hopefully you can relate to these. So who in this room doesn't know who Simon Cowell is? Show of hands? Okay, so everyone here knows who Simon Cowell is. I'm not surprised by that. Simon Cowell is a music executive. His job is to scout talent in the music world. He filters through all of the people who are interested in a position in the music industry. We know him best in the US for his role as a judge on shows like American Idol, America's Got Talent, The X Factor. And what's interesting about Simon is that, there are a lot of talent scouts in the music industry, but Simon has created this fame for himself by designing these shows where his job is to really sit on a panel and provide his opinion, which is a strong one, and really helped pull these people together in a way that makes him actually almost more famous than the people that he's bringing to us as an American audience. So what I think is interesting about Simon is that these shows that he's created, allow him to curate the content of, the music talent, but he's also provided an opportunity for those of us in the audience to comment on it. So the mix that he's created is really this, combination of curate and comment, if we go back to our original content approaches. Next person I want to talk about is Rachel Zoe. Does anyone not know who Rachel Zoe is? I expected a couple people. So Rachel Zoe is a fashion stylist. She's got an A-list clientele, people like Kate Hudson, Eva Mendes, Cameron Diaz, Demi Moore, Nicole Richie. This is Rachel over here, for those of you unfamiliar. As a fashion stylist, she's really a specialist in the area of fashion, right? She goes around the world, goes to fashion shows. She finds designer fashion and really pulls and assembles the looks that are right for her clientele. What makes Rachel appropriate for this conversation is that she's really taken that behind-the-scenes approach to styling, which there are a lot of people who do that, and she's chosen to build up a reputation for herself by getting herself on a reality TV show on Bravo. If any of you watched, she's on the Rachel Zoe Project, and this show specifically follows her around as she goes to fashion shows and as she pulls those looks for her clients, and you watch her go through the trials and tribulations of it, and frankly, it's quite entertaining. But more importantly, she's used curation to really build some fame for herself. And this is not something that other people aren't doing, but she's used it to really elevate her reputation. Now, what's even more interesting about Rachel is that she's actually started to become recognizable for her own style. Boho chic. I don't know if anyone's actually dressed in that look today because it's, but tonight, right? Outfit change, wardrobe swap. So, but this, it doesn't really matter. But this is really about like oversized necklaces and drapey clothing on very frail figures, kind of. You saw it in the last picture. But what she's been able to do with this is she's really leveraged the fame and the success that she's gained from the curation aspect of her role, and she's built it into a new line that she now sells at Bloomingdale's. So she's even progressed her career even further by starting with curation and really making public her successful capabilities within that field. So she's sort of moved from a content mix of just curation to curation and creation. Michael Arrington, he is the founder of TechCrunch.com. Some of you may be familiar with this website. This is basically a website that provides commentary on technology, and it also provides profiles of venture capital, new businesses and websites, other devices that are coming out. And what Michael does is he's actually the editor and a contributor for this website. So he founded it, he contributes, and he's very opinionated. So over the course of this experience of building the website, he started in 2005, he gained a lot of notoriety, and he's sort of evolved his career, but people started paying attention to what he was saying. He was pulling together information for people who were interested in the topics that he had identified. And what ended up happening is that he has been named within the last number of years, one of the most powerful people on the internet by reputable publications like Wired and Forbes. In 2008, he was named by Time magazine one of the most influential people in the world. So this is really, I think, another example of a person who pulled together information for people who are interested in a specific topic and actually formed some opinions and shared those opinions to help shape people's perspectives and give them some insight and direction around that topic area. So I think Robert Scoble actually discusses curation in a really nice way. It puts it into some nice perspective. He says a curator is an information chemist. He or she mixes atoms together in a way to build an info molecule, then adds value to that molecule. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if data is the new oil, then curation is the new refinery. Because I really do think that curation is going to be something that makes its way into your content mixes very soon, if it hasn't already. So I want to go back to that question I asked about dinner. A lot of you raised your hands, and I want you to think about your approach to dinner in the same manner that we talked about content on the web. Now, create, in this instance, talks about, or really represents ingredients that you have around the house. You use them from scratch, and you create a recipe or a meal with them. Comments, I think of that more of taking other people's recipes and adjusting them to suit what your household is interested in, what they like. Your household is your audience, right, in this case. And then curate, I think of that as having a collection of recipes that work for your household. So things that fit their interests, their flavor profiles, things that have worked and they smiled, they clean their plates, you use it again. So what I think that's interesting about this is I personally do take responsibility for dinner on occasion in my household. And personally, my content mix includes, having ingredients that I know I like, that I know work well, and then putting them together in some way that I make up at that moment in time, combined with having a handful of recipes that are sort of tried and true. I know I like them, and when I have the ingredients around and don't really want to think about, that's what I fall back to. So for me, my content mix is really in between the create and curate. And the reason I think this is a really nice analogy is because my point to you is not that you must start curation, you must start curating. But what I do think is that it's important to think about the people in your audience, the people that you're trying to market, the firm itself, the practices, and think about what their strengths are, what their interests are, and decide where amongst this mix they fall. How are you going to market them? So I'm going to leave you with a question. Maybe it's a challenge, but really to start thinking about what the mix is going to look like, what your marketing mix will look like in 10 years. I certainly believe, as I said, that curation will start to play a larger role, but it'll depend on what makes sense for your firm. So I think if you think about it with respect to your practices, even down to the level of your individual attorneys, it may look different for each of those, but that is what I will leave you with. And questions?